This is LA's 9/11, I think
Yes.
is what we're kind of thinking of.
And we're going to be looking at LA's 9/11 in the show today, and we're going to be asking, looking at why progressivism is making this situation worse and may even have caused it.
Hello and welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop. I'm Ann McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim, and welcome to the scoop from a devastated Los Angeles. It's been a very tough week here in Los Angeles, and I think it's going to get worse.
Yeah, very uncertain, very, very uncertain what's going to happen. And we spent last evening with some evacuees, very good friends of ours who, are unsure what the status of their home is. But we also have so many friends who've lost their homes, including one of our board members. And the producer here in our studio has lost his family home.
And his girlfriend's home, and we were speaking to those people last night, the evacuees, and they were saying, "Is it really only the middle of January?"
Yeah, it feels like to us. It all feels like we're into March or something, because it just feels like, even though it's just obviously apparently it's the beginning of January, it feels like we've been in this 25 for quite a while, and it's just extraordinary. This is LA's 9/11. I think is what we're kind of thinking of.
And we're going to be looking at LA's 9/11 in the show today, and we're going to be asking, looking at why progressivism is making this situation worse and may even have caused it. So we'll talk about that later. But first, we want to drop some big news. We at the Unreported Story Society have been working on a big project, something that's genuinely really shocking, and that's a much overused word. As you may have seen, there's some news stories about Muslim grooming gangs in the UK that were preying on British girls, white British girls, and that's significant. Some as young as 10 or 11 or 12, while the authorities looked away, and actually while the authorities assisted too. So tens of thousands of girls were subjected to the most vile abuse, and this is vile, this is depraved. This puts a new meaning on the word depraved. Whilst the authorities and the police looked away for fear of being called racist.
And these girls, by the way, were from underclass. If you know, they were children that had from very broken families, from very dysfunctional families.
Yes.
And that made them that made them a target, and that made them super vulnerable. And it made them, what should have happened in reality was that every part of the state should have been there to protect these girls, and exactly the opposite happened.
In fact, some of them handed them back to their abusers because they're just white trash, and they're being handed back to their boyfriends, or they're consenting, or they've got a drink problem. I mean, we're
going to talk a lot about that, because we're going to speak to Baroness Claire Fox later.
So, but we've got hold of the court transcripts, and as we at the Unreported Story Society do, we're filming the judge's sentencing remarks in one of the cases.
And we're going to bring it to you verbatim, line by line, of what the judge said at the end of quite a lengthy trial, where there had been a jury, where they had gone through evidence, where they had, investigated these crimes. And his summary judgment is unbelievable, but true, and needs to be heard and needs to be known around the world. And so that's why we're doing this. And by the way, you can help, by the way. We have a very generous donor who will double whatever you send in. So please do help us get this out to the widest possible audience, because this is exactly what we do. It's the unreported story. The Unreported Story Society. This is an unreported story, an underreported story, a misinformed, a genuine cover-up. And we'll be asking Baroness Fox when we talk to her. We'll be asking her, could it happen here?
Yes. Where do people donate to?
And people can donate to the unreportedstorysociety.com. Unreported Stories. And by the way, it's coming up on the screen there of where you can just click through to donate, and we would really appreciate it, because nobody else is doing this work, and we need your help to make sure we can keep doing it.
So we're dropping the full project on socials, X, YouTube, etc. on Thursday, January the 16th. You know our verbatim stuff. We did the Gosnell movie, which is pretty verbatim. We did the Spacey, the Weinstein podcast, used extensive Ferguson play, the Gosnell play.
FBI Lovebirds.
FBI Lovebirds, October 7th.
Yeah, verbatim is something that we really like, that bringing people the actual words.
Yes.
We're not editing it, we're not changing it, we're not, simplifying it or
introducing complicit characters as liberals do in verbatim.
No, we're giving it to you hard and fast, and it's tough going, but you owe it to civilization, by the way.
Yes.
Because this is civilizational stuff.
Yes.
You owe it to civilization to listen to the whole of the judgment from the judge, but we'll bring that to you, as we said, on Thursday.
Yes.
But now we're going to go on to what's been going on here in Los Angeles. Obviously, this is a huge story, an ongoing story, not made better, by the way, by the local people who are meant to be. I mean, I think one thing that struck me recently is that government, we're conservatives, we're all about small government, but we still believe in government and the idea that government, the things that a government are meant to do, protect you from a security point of view, protect you and protect your property, both of which has not happened here. And it's been it's an unbelievable situation that's going on here. It's not made better, by the way. I was going to tell Phelim, so many people we know have lost homes. So many people we know are evacuees, with uncertainty about what's going on with their properties. And that uncertainty and that fear and that stress is not made better, by the way, by Phelim was in London shooting the stuff that we were just talking about earlier, filming that. And I was here on my own, and it wasn't made better by people, me including me, getting repeated evacuation warnings from the authorities, and then being told an hour and a half later, oopsie, you weren't meant to get that. Yeah. And they have repeatedly sent out these evacuation warnings. So this is just a kind of a flavour of what's been going on.
But it's hard to describe the scale of the destruction, hard to find words for it. And that's what we do. We find words for things. As we're reporting it here, there's 24 people dead so far. We know the Pacific Palisades the best. It's literally over there. We're about 5 miles from the evacuation zone. I think they've allowed people back into north of Montana. Is that right, Anna, in Santa Monica? So Palisades is north of us, and then you've got Santa Monica and Venice. And the fire was spreading south. Now it looks like with the winds, it's going east inland to very heavily populated areas away from us. But so many people, as we're saying, our producer has lost house. The Palisades, actually, I know you probably see on the TV, where all the stars live and all that. But actually, it's a kind of old LA in some ways. And people, of course, bought houses, 50 years ago there for tuppence halfpenny. So, and you've got sometimes, ordinary people and multi-generational, their children live around the corner. So
they went to school around the corner.
Yeah, so
all their friends, their neighbours.
Yeah.
It looks, I mean, many of you, everyone has probably seen the photographs at this point, but it looks like Dresden. I mean, obviously nobody can get up there either. People can't get back up into the area because it's all cordoned off because, of course, we have looting here.
Put up we've got looting, of course. In a lawless state, you're going to have looting. Let's put up some of the photographs that people have got from there. As you're saying, like, our board member has lost a house. Our friend David, his beautiful dream house is gone.
Our friend David, who has been so kind to us for over the years, he had a beautiful screening room in his house, and he was very, very generous.
That's right.
For year upon year upon year. Every time we needed a facility. Sometimes, I mean, I remember going to David's house, and our dear friend David. I mean, we can.
The first time we came to LA, remember that?
First time we came, we were like these strangers in a strange land and whatever, and we needed somewhere to show up. And we met David. I remember we met David at
Defending the
American Dream conference in Washington D.C. I made a speech, and David and another David, his friend David, the two Davids, grabbed me and said, "We want to buy you a drink." And I'm like, I'm always open for that. And then we came out to LA. We always remained friends with David, but he has always been. And from that time, actually, we came out a couple of months after that, and we needed somewhere to show. I can't remember which documentary it was back then.
Mind Your Own Business.
It could have even been Mind Your Own Business. And John Voight came, and
Andrew
Breitbart came to that screening in David's house. And over the years, many, many times, and most recently, by the way, when we were doing My Son Hunter, I said to David, can I bring up the Breitbart guys? Can the Breitbart guys come up to have a look at the movie to see what they think of it? And we went to David's house, and again, just so generous and so kind. And that incredibly beautiful home is razed to the ground. It's just extraordinary.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
I mean, it is like 9/11. Like,
so everywhere you go right now in LA, like, our experience is, that people are literally, I was at Ralph's the other day at the supermarket. the woman who was at the checkout, like she starts telling me all about her family. People are hugging each other. You know, in Costco, it was the same thing. People are obviously in shock as well because there's a lot of panic buying. So the stuff that's not there, everyone's trying to get air purifiers. Couldn't get them in Home Depot, couldn't get them in Costco. We eventually got one, and actually it really has made a difference because the air quality is extraordinary. You look at I'll just show you a photograph of the car. The other day I had the car cleaned because, anyway, long story, I was having a driving test. I failed. It's another story for another day. But
don't you have your driver's license?
I have a driving license, but I've got bad eyesight, and I had to cover one eye, and then I had to cover the other eye. And when I covered one eye, obviously I couldn't read. Anyway, I had to do it was probably not the right time to be doing a driving test, but I did clean the car before I went up there. And then this is what the car looked like after it had been cleaned and left overnight. So people are breathing this in. So it's really, really bad. But
and again, as you say, it's not helped by these erroneous. But
I'm putting it up on screen there.
Alerts.
This is the emergency alert that went out to the whole city. So people were getting this as far away as, like, I don't know, as far away as Long Beach. People were literally getting these evacuation orders.
And of course,
I'm quite a calm. I think of myself as a calm, collected type. And I was on my own, got this emergency thing, and you just suddenly think, you know, what, you know, and extraordinary. And then it took at least an hour for them to issue their oopsie. Sorry, we made a mistake about that.
It took an hour after. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so look, there's so much to talk about the fires, but you know, we live in a very progressive city and the most progressive state, and we wanted to talk about. You know, we're thinking 5 ways that progressivism either caused this fire or made it worse or contributed to it. And we're not saying it did cause the fire, but we're saying it made it more likely. It made it worse. Yeah. It just has made a mess. I mean, firefighters running out of water. It's a
big one, right? I think that's the right one to start with, Phelim.
Yes.
Yeah. So running out of water in a place that is really prone to fires seems like incompetence. Let's be honest, right?
Yes. So Robert Bryce,
our friend,
who, if you want to go to his Substack, he wrote on his Substack. So the people who are in charge of our water, the wonderful Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, LADWP, who are truly awful people. I remember during the drought, they said, you got to reduce your usage by 25% for the drought. So we did 20%, and we reduced it by 20%. Everyone reduced it by 25%, and suddenly they realized they had 25% less income. So they put the tariffs up by 25%. So that's the reward you get for
listening to these people.
Yes. So they recently sent out an annual report, and this is from Robert's Substack, and their latest annual report is a 59-page paean to the gods of sustainability, solar energy, green hydrogen, decarbonisation, diversity, equity, and of course the clean energy transition. So the report shows that LADWP is snuggling every green energy trope in the handbook of sustainability. They go on for the 58-page. The report talks about the 3rd page of the report has photographs of the agency's top leadership, including Greg Reed, who is Senior Assistant General Manager, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. In 2021, the utility created an Office of Diversity and Inclusion to help LADWP move forward in all matters of DEI. The report, and this is important.
This is very important.
Contains precisely.
It contains one. So remember again, 59 pages of this report. The report contains one paragraph on wildfire mitigation.
Yes.
One paragraph, and one way of preserving water.
I mean, you know, so that is the LADWP. By the way, what's equity, DEI got to do with providing water? So, you know, that's who's in charge of the water. Then, you know, what's out there in the state? Well, you know, hey, we've got a dry climate in Southern California. How do you preserve water? Well, the way you preserve water, by the way, is you build dams and reservoirs. Now, you may have seen that the reservoirs were empty and dry because they were closed for maintenance. But they're closed for maintenance, but there's no building working on. There's no maintenance going on. They just closed them and then decided that we'll do it in a few years' time. But a great way, as I say, is by building dams. So what are the great and the good? And we've talked about this previously on the show. They've been dismantling dams in California.
The largest dam removal project on the planet Earth.
Oh,
happened here in California.
We have the largest dam removal project in the planet Earth. Now, and I'll put up a headline there from the Guardian newspaper who celebrated Now, these dams, I want to be clear, are not, I believe, supplying Southern California. But when you have let's play a little clip of Governor Newsom congratulating himself on how many dams they're removing. These dams, let's play that clip.
Largest dam removal project in U.S. history, and one of the most significant, if not the most significant, water restoration project, bringing back salmon and steelhead into this basin. This project could not have happened without extraordinary partnerships with tribal nations and, of course, our partners in the North and Oregon. We just finished a celebration with the Secretary of the Interior and our tribal council and tribal leaders, and I couldn't be more proud as a Californian, and I couldn't be more proud as a father, because my kids and their great-great-grandkids will have the opportunity to see something that, well, has been here since time immemorial, and it's about damn time we got this done.
Right. So those dams may not be associated with Los Angeles, but when you are telling everyone in your administration, everyone in the state, we are removing dams, that's our priority, they're not going to build reservoirs. They're not going to treat reservoirs with importance. They're not going to apply for planning permission. They're not going to do all these things. So that's the progressive way is destroying the protections that we need for fire. So then that's the water issue. Then we get to the personnel, as Richard Riggery said last week. Personnel is policy.
Yes.
Now, senior firefighters, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, senior firefighters were not hired because of their skill or competence in fighting fires, but because of their identity. So LA Fire Chief Kristen Crowley, let's put a picture up, is proudly a lesbian. And by the way, we've got nothing against lesbians.
We have nothing against lesbians. Can I just say, by the way, it's so hilarious. The 3 senior officers at the LAFD, the 3 are lesbians, and they're all called Kristen. Move on. I think it's relevant. I think that's important to say. I won't even get into how much money they're earning, but it's a shed loads of money. I think
she's on 640.
But we were just saying earlier, and that's actually a really good point. You know the way if you were, if you buy a lottery ticket, like what's the chances of you winning the lottery, whatever. And people, by the way, can work that out. It's that's what they call those guys, actuaries. Yes. So actuaries can work that out. It's all very mathematical. Here's one for the actuaries. I'd love this to be done, by the way.
Yeah.
What are the chances that the LAFD will have 3 lesbians in the most senior roles?
Yes.
And by the way, the other thing that occurred to me this morning was, when did we start to know the sexuality of people's job that were in jobs? Like, why would we even know that? We shouldn't know that. We actually shouldn't know anything about these people. And the fact that we do know that is really bad. But I would love an actuary to weigh in on that. What are the chances? You think about how many lesbians are in the planet Earth? What's the percentage? How many of them go into the fire department? I think it's probably improbable, to say the least. Improbable.
Though and that's what I said at the beginning. I was very careful. I can say without fear of contradiction, these were diversity hires.
Yes,
because the odds are just wrong, impossible otherwise. So I want to play a clip now.
Oh my God, can I just talk about this clip? Yeah. So the chief fire officer in Los Angeles County is Kristen Crowley. This is another one of the lesbians. Now, this clip, this is another one of the
lesbian
deputies.
Lesbian
number 2.
She's the deputy fire chief.
Yes.
And her name is... Which Kristen is she now?
She's Kristen Larson as opposed to Kristen Crowley.
Can I just say something?
You can,
The spelling we have there.
Yes.
She may be a Christine. Does that alter our...
I think we can throw them in with all the Christens and Christines.
And E doesn't make that much of a difference.
So Christine Larson says the department... Actually, you know what?
I'm going
to play it and then we'll talk about it. Let's watch this clip.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire. Which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
You bleeping, bleep.
Stop now, Phelim. You're not bleeping on this podcast. So this is an extraordinary person who basically says, first of all, the one thing that, and it's like that thing of, right, she first of all, she actually thinks, but I don't know if she even believes this, but anyway, here's what she says. She says that when you're in a crisis, when you're in a huge crisis, What you really care about is that the person who is dealing with you in the crisis looks like you. And can I just say, like, for example, if you're in the hospital, all I care about in the hospital is that the person that's dealing with me, I don't care if they're autistic. I just want them to be really, really good that they were really good at school, that they were better at school than everybody else, that they went to college and they were the best person in the class.
I don't want them to have had a social life at college.
I don't want them to have ever had a social life. I don't care. They're living alone in a little apartment on their own. I just want them to be the best. That's what I care about.
But no, that last line kills me, though.
No, the last line is unbelievable, by the way. And Phelim, I played this to Phelim this morning, and Phelim made a really good point, which was, this video, by the way, wasn't done casually. This would have been thought through. Scripted. It would have been scripted. They would have edited it. They shot it. They went over it over and over again. And she basically said,
and it was cleared by the lesbian head of communications and the lesbian head of
saying this. By the way, should constitute, you should be sacked for saying this.
And everyone who allowed her to say it, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire. What does that even mean?
How dare you?
It doesn't make sense.
How dare you? Which mean nobody ever wants to be in a fire. So being in a fire is of course you're in the wrong place, but you're living in your home, by the way. This idea this is who's running the department here.
But everyone who signed off on that should be fired also.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So let's then another reason.
We'll move on.
Another reason. Let's move from lesbians to plants and fish.
I think it's important to move to plants and fish after lesbians.
Yes.
So plants and fish are obviously more important than saving people from being burned alive
and their properties.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is. I mean, there's so much out there. You know, Alyssa Finlay really
writing
summed
for the
it up.
Wall Street Journal. She wrote a really great piece just this week. Really, really powerful about this. Yes. And she basically said, and this story is just so powerful. I thought I'd read this from the Wall Street Journal. It's just really powerful. This tells you everything you need to know about the trouble we're in here. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in 2019 sought to widen a fire access road and replace old wooden utility poles in the Topanga Canyon abutting the Palisades with steel ones to make power lines fire and wind resistant. In the process,
so let's just so the Topanga Canyon, right? These canyons go up to the Palisades. The Palisades is up on a cliff, right, up on a bluff, I think you call it.
Yes.
And they wanted to widen because these canyon roads, they're like something out of 18th century. They're very pretty and very scenic, but they're incredibly dangerous. That's where James Dean drove his
car off
his
the road.
Porsche off the road, and I know why. And
well, there could have been alcohol involved in that film. I'm just going to go out on a limb on that one.
And speed. Right.
Perhaps.
Well, road conditions too. Anyway, so they wanted to widen the road and they wanted to take these old wooden poles and make them steel so that, because as I said earlier, I think, you know, a lot of the times it's these power lines being burned and falling.
But I'm sure that our listeners and viewers, because they know us well, will know, of course, that in the midst of doing this, you won't believe what happened.
Yes.
182 say it.
Respect the plant.
182 Bronton milk vetches. Bronton's milk vetch plants and endangered species were removed.
Yes.
The horror. And so the utility had to halt the project as state officials investigated the plant destruction. More than a year later, the California Coastal Commission issued a cease and desist order. They fined the utility $2 million and required mitigation for the project's impact on the species. By the way, our producer here, I think, has burst into tears at this point. He is just banging his head off the table because he can't work this out. Because he lives there. He lived there. His home was there and is gone. But it's really important, and I'm sure he's getting an awful lot of comfort from the fact that the Bronton milk vetch plants were protected.
Yes. Not only that, and then she's been really naughty here. They were ordered to replace non-native vegetation with plants native to the state. And she says you have to chuckle at the contradiction. California's progressives want to expel foreign flora and fauna, but provide a sanctuary for illegal immigrants.
Yes.
So that is where, you know, as I say, plants.
But can I just add this bit? Because actually, this is also an amazing point. Since the milk vetch requires wildfires to propagate, the only way to boost its numbers is to let the land burn. A cynic might wonder if environmentalists interfered with fire protection prevention in hope of evicting humans from what they view as the plant's rightful habitat. To radical environmentalists, every human is a colonizer.
We have to be against colonizers. And I mean, I know there's been a lot talked about the smelt. So the smelt
Let's talk about the smelt, Phelim.
Is a tiny fish up in the delta, and
there's a picture of it.
They don't want the delta to become too salinated, so they decide how much water they're going to give to the smelt every year, and then when the smelt is happy, then they give money to the farmers, and they give money to give water to the farmers and to Southern California. And the smelt wins every year, and we get less and less water. And when you need a fire, then when you need to fight a fire, then you run out of water. Because the smelt comes first.
And the Wall Street Journal are very funny, and they basically say you can lead a Californian progressive to water, but you can't make them think.
Yes. So then
we come to prescribed burns.
Yes. So there's a great Twitter thread, but it's also from the person uses graphs from the Property and Environment Research Center. So basically, if you want to do a prescribed burn to try and protect the locale from a possibility of a wildfire, and a prescribed burn, it creates a barrier.
So it's a controlled burn that does what nature will want to do anyway. And so instead of that, you do it yourself. You make it happen.
But you
control
a barrier.
But you control it.
But what that does is creates a barrier of dead vegetation so that the fires can't spread. But
if you want to do that, though, in California, you have to deal with the regulators.
Yes.
And then the regulators will also force you into litigation. So basically,
environmental activists will.
The average time, and we're putting those charts up there on the screen for you.
Yes.
The average time to begin U.S. Forest Service fuel treatments, 3 to 6 years or 4 to 7 years. But the projects that require environmental impact statements, which are basically all of them, can take between 5.3 years and 7.2 years. So in order to do any of these prescribed burns, which are a really good idea, basically the state of California will do everything in their power to make it impossible for you to do that.
It should be 5.3 days.
It should be, yeah. Yeah, yes. Totally.
So number 4, another reason why progressivism either caused, this is possibly because how they caused the fire rather than made it worse. Fact. If you allow tens of thousands of criminally insane people to live and commit crimes, and if you allow them
with impunity,
if you allow them to live and commit crimes without impunity, then many of them will do criminally insane things like set fires in their homeless encampments in places like the Pacific Palisades. And we have an actual example of this. Our friend David, do you remember a few years ago, we were watching on the TV where down below, off the PCH, there was a fire in the undergrowth there, and it was heading up towards David's house, and we were watching it in real time, and then the guys came out of the ocean and put water on it, and it was extinguished. And we were on the phone to David, and he says, yeah, we've been saved. He says, and I says, what happened? How did it start? He says, there's a homeless encampment at the bottom of the road by the PCH, and they light things, and it goes up the side of the bluffs. And there we had it. But since then, the homelessness problem has just got worse. And David's lost his house this time. And up until the last election, it was legal to steal $1,000 a day without any punishment. Yep. It was legal to inject drugs. It probably still is. It's legal. Crime has been decriminalized.
Yep.
And that sends a message. Bad people spot weaknesses. Insane people spot weaknesses. They thrive on it, and they will do criminally insane things like set fires. And I think there's 2 reasons the fires happen is because down power lines and arson. I would say you'll probably find it's 50-50 this time, maybe a slight majority arson, I think, is general. The first fire can often be a power line, and then the criminally insane or the criminals decide to just...
Well, they have detained arsonists, by the way, already. So we have seen evidence of that.
And this is, when you have number 5, when you have a big progressive government, you have a big wasteful and completely incompetent government, like sending out evacuation warnings to completely the wrong people.
Yep.
I mean, just for example, so Governor Newsom, and this is from the 8th of January, which I think is before the fire, they issued this statement. We've issued all these we're taking wildfire seriously. And how are we doing that? We're investing. This is a statement from the Governor Newsom's office. We're investing in wildfire resilience. The governor's budget reflects a total of $4 billion, which maintains 2.5, and which $4 billion in wildfire resilience, which maintains 2.5 billion in prior investments and commits another 1.5 billion over the next several years. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, it wasn't very good. Oh, and the state is investing 200 million annually for the healthy forest and fire prevention programs. In 2023, and I couldn't get the most up-to-date figures, and this is just one example, 2023, and by the way, out of that billion, how much is going on diversity programs? But in 2023, the California spent 6.5 billion giving free healthcare to illegals. They've just had a special legislative session to raise $25 million to combat Trump.
Not combat fires, but combat Trump, who is a legally elected president, which no one, by the way, like literally no one is questioning the legitimacy of the election.
They've not had a special legislative session to help the victims of the fire. They have nothing. No, they all went to Sacramento. And then you had Mayor Karen Bass, the mayor of Ghana, the mayor of Accra.
Oh, yeah, who basically had promised during her, when she was going...
Let's put that headline up.
Let's put that headline up, yeah. I'm not going to travel anywhere, basically. I'm not going to go anywhere.
I'm going to be totally devoted to LA.
And then she goes to Ghana.
Ghana.
For no reason at all, except for the inauguration of some president that has nothing to do with anything to do with Los Angeles.
Zero.
Like, it's not like she's learning anything about how we should maybe combat fires here in the area.
Yes.
And by the way, the timing of this is extraordinary because she actually went when... Prior to her leaving, there had been a huge amount of talk about the fact that these Santa Anas were coming, that it was a perfect storm for a disaster. And she just thought, you know what? I'd just love to go to Ghana, though, business class, have a couple of gin and tonics on the plane. I'm talking about myself now.
So you're talking about yourself.
I am.
You're projecting now.
I am projecting, but what can I do? But there it is. That's what she did. That's what she chose to do. She chose to have this job, and then she chose to decide to go on a jolly instead of doing her job.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's as we record this, we're expecting the Santa Anas to take up again this evening and
get worse.
And who knows? But I think one thing that we know for sure is that the people who are in charge here are not serious people. These are not serious people.
Yes.
And it's scary to suddenly realize that. And I think maybe we've kind of been saying that, but it's like the same thing as it's like the same thing with when we were dealing with the Gosnell story, and you can talk about evil in a theoretical way, and then you deal with the Gosnell story and realize that evil is real. You talk about incompetence in California at a theoretical level, and then you live through it, and you live through every day of it, and you watch what's happening to people who are basically terrorized, people who have had to run out of their homes. And the stories are everywhere. The stories are absolutely everywhere. Horrible, horrible stories.
You meet people in Costco in tears,
People are in tears, but there's evacuees, and then there's people who have lost everything. And then there's the evacuees who don't know the status of their home. And of course, the police aren't letting people back up to have a look at what's going on with their homes. And by the way, one of the best apps for people to get information is by a 501c3, completely independent of the government.
Yes. Citizen, what's it called? Watch Duty.
Watch Duty. If
yes. But no one is using the government information service. Everyone who's getting evacuation notices is immediately going on Watch Duty to check if they're accurate.
Yeah, because Watch. So a 501c3 independent is where people are going for their information. And the other thing that I really love, there's certain things in this maelstrom and chaos that are very would make you smile, let's say.
Yes.
So the TV news is obviously giving us wall-to-wall coverage, and they're kind of up there right by the fires and stuff. The only reason they're able to broadcast is because of Elon Musk and because of Starlink.
Yes.
Because they're using the Starlink technology. Without him, we'd be really in the dark, even more so than we are as it is. But just it's one of those kind of curious things, that in the midst of all of this, they all hate him. But yeah, guess what? We wouldn't have the news without him, literally.
Yeah, I mean, the local news has done a great job of covering the breaking story, I have to say. They brought in reporters from all over America, because I'm critical of journalists a lot of the times, but they're doing a great job, and it's a tough job.
Very, very tough.
I mean, I'm also critical of the journalists saying, "Oh, it was really tough." Some stories are genuinely tough to cover, and this is unrelenting. It's actually unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's stressful. So fair play to them. I just wish they'd done stories like when Kristen had issued that video.
Yeah.
Slamming someone for being in a fire
Yeah.
The deputy fire chief, why they didn't call for her resignation.
It's
I think,
appalling.
I don't want to say the positive thing. Looks like the LA Times.
Oh yeah.
I just saw the owner, Patrick Schoon. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Apologies for that. But Patrick Schoon has said that he regrets endorsing Karen Bass for mayor, and I think that is going to change. Maybe the politics of LA will change as a result of this.
This is something we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this is one of the things that we're questioning: is what are people going to do? People we know who've lost their homes, are they going to rebuild? Are they going to just move out of state? Are they going to move somewhere else in the state? We don't know the answer to those questions, but it's people are in a terrible, terrible way here.
Yes.
It's really, really awful, and we're very grateful to everyone who's been in touch with us. By the way, it's been one of those kind of weird things where people are getting in touch with us that we haven't talked to for years and whatever. So it's that's a beautiful part of it. But
thank you very much for getting in touch. I mean, it really has been. Well, let's hope next time we talk we have better news. So now we're going to go over to an interview we did earlier with Baroness Claire Fox from the UK. This is about our really important project, the Grooming Gangs project. It's going to come out hopefully on Thursday, January the 16th. It's one of our most important projects, and we'll go over now to the interview we did earlier, and you'll hear all about the project. It's a great interview. Claire's always a great interviewee. It's a truly shocking. I think it's a truly shocking story. It's an amazing story. So let's go over to that interview now. As we were saying earlier, we're working on a major project, and in a world where you think you can't be shocked anymore, this is truly shocking. You may have seen some of the news stories about Muslim grooming gangs that were preying on white British girls, some as young as 12, while the authorities looked away and in many cases assisted the abusers. Tens of thousands of girls were subject to the most vile abuse imaginable. In fact, it's unimaginable. While the authorities and the police looked away for fear of being called racist, and because the victims were white working class, which the elites all over the world despise. There's so much to it. So as we were saying, we've got hold of some of the court transcripts. And you know what we do when we get court transcripts? We reenact them verbatim to bring the truth to you. But we wanted to really bring someone on because it's so unbelievable. Perhaps people wouldn't believe it. So we wanted to bring someone on who can give us the background, give us the truth. So we have brought on Claire Fox, Baroness Claire Fox, to do this. Claire is a member of the House of Lords. She's the director and founder of the think tank, the Academy of Ideas, which she set up to create a public space where ideas can be discussed and debated freely. And we can assert that we have actually
freely discussed things at the Battle of Ideas ourselves.
Yes. She's a champion of free speech and democracy and is dedicated to fighting the culture war. She's also the author of the book, I Find That Offensive. So welcome to the show, Claire. I think you'll have the answers for us. Welcome, Claire.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you.
So
first things first, what are grooming gangs? It's such a shocking term. It sounds like a moral panic. It can't possibly be true. Can you give us the background, Claire, on what's just coming to prominence now, what people are becoming aware of around the world?
But what's the story? What's the story? What's the original story?
Yeah, the original story is that maybe for 20, 25 years we've known about this, but it hasn't broken through, to use that phrase. Pockets of the story were known, but really now it's kind of exploded onto the scene. And in towns, particularly towns around the north of England, that if you want a kind of left behind towns, fairly run down, the old industrial belt of parts of England, but actually it's more extensive throughout the United Kingdom. But anyway, to take a couple of towns like Oldham, just as one of the most famous ones, it was discovered that young children, effectively, from 11, 12 up to 14, 15, 16, young girls, largely who were in care homes run by the state, i.e. they were from chaotic backgrounds, family backgrounds, so they weren't living at home or they were orphaned or whatever had happened to them. They were in the care of the state. That they were being systematically picked up by people in the local area who were predominantly Pakistani men, predominantly Muslims, and sexually abused regularly. Now, it's very hard to believe. I mean, it is the kind of story that every mad conspiracist would come up with if they were to have thought of it. So it ends up being that you think, no, it can't be true. Yeah. So one of the things about these northern towns is they're also often and predominantly where many people from British Pakistani backgrounds are living. They're traditionally where a lot of migrants moved in and communities were formed. I think an important point to make here was for many years fully integrated into British society, right? But over a period of time, for political reasons which you might want to push me on, and basically the policy of multiculturalism that started to treat communities differently, then suddenly these communities were living parallel lives in a way, became a law unto themselves. And this also coincides with, because there's a large immigrant communities in those areas, they were often people who were running local businesses. You know, they would be running the local taxi firm, they would be running the kebab shops, they would be running local shops, and many of them, in fact, became political because they were a hardcore vote for the Labour Party in the UK. So they would often be running the council. They would often be elected representatives or have positions of officialdom. So in these circumstances, you can imagine a situation whereby when the stories started to come to light of a minority of those communities committing these awful, unspeakable crimes, which, by the way, I don't want you to think this is like your normal sex abuse. This is girls of 11 or 12 being taken to what were known as rape houses, and men would queue up and rape them over and over again.
Yes.
Every night. And nobody'd even notice. And then when people from, you know, some people, of course, from social workers or teachers or whatever would say, what's going on? I've just heard this young girl, I know, Andrea, crying down the road, or Samantha is upset and she says this has been happening. We should go to the police. And the head teacher or the head social worker would say, is she really truthful? Wow. You know, she's a bit of a wild one, her. I mean, we hear that she's taking a lot of alcohol. She says maybe it's her boyfriend. I mean, she keeps boasting about having this older boyfriend who runs a taxi service, who's driving around all the time. Another one would say, well, they do like getting free food at the kebab shop.
Yeah.
The mother is a drug addict after all. Yeah. They're very mature for their age. Maybe they're consenting. So she's 12, but she looks like she's 18, 19, and she does wear short gown. Anyway, that's going on. And also the political point that you made in your introduction was that this is at a time when the British establishment did not want to draw attention to the emergence of a more radical separatist Islamism in British society. They were trying to keep the lid on it. Even when terrorist outrages happened and there were bombs in the UK or mass stabbings, or which we have had, you know, after your 9/11, we had a British version of that. The attempts by the authorities were not to reveal that and talk about it, but to say, oh my God, this is terrible, but we don't want to make a fuss about it because otherwise the white British working class might all become racist and turn on Muslims, and therefore we've got to keep the lid on it. And this is all happening simultaneously. So they basically started to warn people not to talk about it.
Yes. I mean, it's even slightly worse than not to talk about it. I mean, there were cases where the girls would escape and, you know, and they were drunk and they would be charged with being drunk and disorderly, or they'd be seen to be out of control and returned to their boyfriend, to the adult.
I can't do it justice, Phelim.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. It's just that I wanted to kind of give you a sense of how it sort of happened without anyone noticing. And then you're absolutely right. Then there are other people who are more closely implicated, state employees very often, because once you've then set up this atmosphere which is that you're not really going to investigate and that you don't want to disrupt community relations, atrocious things happen. And you've got two things, haven't you? You've got the don't let's disrupt our community relations with the local Muslim community, and also let's remember these are white trash. Right? So you've got those two things going on at the same time. And so then, of course, if people once the young women start to complain or whatever, or their families start to complain, they become the problem. And so there is an actual active compromise made whereby the young women are left in the situation. I mean, there's examples, I think, of 3 fathers who went to try and rescue their daughters. And it is true that these fathers were not going to win Father of the Year anytime soon. But even they, one way or another, were so abhorred when they heard what was going on that they went to try and get their daughters out. And they were arrested. You know, the police would hand them back to the perpetrators or tell them to go home or even arrest them and say things like, you know, well, you consented, you went along with it. I mean, so this has been going on for a long time.
So why?
But it's also been widely known about, which is a very odd situation because we're only talking about it now in 2020.
Well, that's kind of the question I wanted to get.
Before that, I want to say one thing, and the question is important, but it's just I want people in America to know that for the last 13 years, there's been a conservative government in the UK. That's all I want to say.
Okay, that's actually genuinely very important to say that. Yes,
right. So this is not progressive. Well, it is progressivism, but there was a conservative government with multiple prime ministers, by the way.
Yeah, multiple useless prime ministers, one more useless than the other. But why, I mean, I suppose the question now is, why has this become so prominent right now? Why has this suddenly become a world news story? Why is everyone in America talking about this? What's changed? What happened?
Yeah, so I think it's important, though, that prior point that you were making about the Conservative government is important because to a certain extent, when you've got a Conservative government that keeps the lid on this, there's a kind of more limited group of people who will talk about it. You would expect, perhaps, in a sort of traditional sense, that they would be the ones who blow the lid on it. Yeah. And I think I don't want to present myself as some kind of brave warrior on this. I have talked about it over the years, you know, for decades, but I haven't been a prominent campaigner on it. What would happen is that somebody would bring out a report and I would read the report and I would use any opportunity I could to write about it or speak. And I'd always think that report was going to be the thing which would blow it wide open.
Yes.
And there was even, you know, in 2011, the Times, you know, of London had it as a front page story because Simon Norfolk, one of the journalists, actually went with it, right? That it has been a story, but it would get on the front pages and then it would just dribble away because nobody ever did anything about it. It was never consistently fought. And that's the unforgivable thing that the Conservative Party allowed to happen when they were in government, was that they would speak platitudes, but then kind of think, oh, would that story go away? I made a particular issue of the story in relation to, wait for it, Me Too. And the reason why I did that was because I could not stand the contrast between the obsessive way that the Me Too issue took hold and that every middle-class feminist I knew and every media commentator and every woman you had met ever and every, you know, ally of feminist males and the whole progressive crowd we're all going on about we've got to do something to protect women from these perpetrators around Me Too. And that was happening at the same time as one of these reports about the grooming gangs came out. And I kept saying, well, I agree that women should not be the subject of sexual abuse by men. Can we talk about what's happening with predominantly Asian, although that's not fair on the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Japanese, predominantly Pakistani Muslim communities with these young girls. What are you going to do about it? And they would literally kind of tut, you know, it'd be like, oh God, you're raising this issue. And of course, because the left and because progressive forces and because the conservatives, because everybody ignored it, it left a gap in the narrative in which, of course, there were some more maybe dodgy, potentially racist figures moved in. right? And then that made it worse, because then if you tried to raise it, they'd say not only were you being racist, but you were allying yourself with these
worst.
rather dodgy, bad faith, you know, people who,
characters.
to be honest, I'm not very keen on myself. You know, the genuine hardcore right, as it were, who might be a bit more bad faith. But, you know, I'm not going to condemn them for that, because they drew attention to it. Fair enough. And also because there was a gap left.
Yes.
There was, somebody had to do something.
Yes. If reasonable people won't speak about that, it does leave a market open for unreasonable people to take the high ground.
So, and so, you know, that kind of made it worse. What's blown it open is a number of factors. One, in some ways, is that because the Labour Party are in government, slightly opportunistically, people maybe on the right of mainstream politics are a bit more likely to use it as a stick to beat the Labour government with. And because a lot of the local authorities involved and a lot of the councils involved are Labour councils, well, when I say a lot, I mean all of them, I think, are Labour councils, it means that there's a little bit more, you know, they kind of feel like it can be talked about. That's not what really prompted it. There's a number of very particular, I won't bore you with what, but there has been a number of investigations. I think credit needs to be given actually to a new TV news channel, GB News, because and there's a guy there, Charlie Peters, a young investigative journalist, who made a documentary on it in 2022, at the end of 2022. And he has been following the story ever since and just keeps making the revelation, being really persistent, really smart guy, really persistent in raising it. And there's been, you know what podcast life is like. I'm doing one now, but there was a number of high profile podcasts that were done. Patrick Christie's went on one podcast. He's a GB News presenter. That's different to Charlie. He talked about the grooming gangs. Actually, a podcast brought out by Winston Marshall, which was filmed at the Battle of Ideas, which was an interview with Charlie Peters. And these are accounts with massive followings, and they all came out. Also, what happened was that the court transcripts were made available, and you've already mentioned them. I mean, when you start reading these, I mean, they were available, but they were put into the public arena, and you're reading them and you can't believe it.
Yeah. And I think there's something obviously about a court transcript where that has the power and the, you know, the veracity, and you feel like, okay, other things I've heard, maybe whatever. But now this is a judge who has, you know, sat through a trial. There has been a jury. They have done all the due process. And he's saying this and he's summarizing. And it makes for extraordinary reading. Obviously,
the nature of the offences is so vile that even in the worst kind of almost pornographic true life crime that I watch all the time on TV, where you kind of like the gory details. This is like sort of times 100. And you're talking about children who are still alive, and that it was continual and perpetual. So I'll let your genius bring out the transcript details, so I won't repeat them, and I almost can't. But honestly, if you'd have told me they were true, I wouldn't have believed it and thought they were exaggerated. And you're absolutely right, Anne. The fact that it was a court transcript. Right. So there's that. The other factor that's come in is that because there's a prison crisis in the UK, they're letting out a lot of people early from prison. And so there was more and more kind of stories of people being let out early. And Charlie Peters, that journalist I talked about, went to one of a recent, you know, court case. So this is still going on. This is the thing. It's still going on. So he went to some massive court case of a massive gang, exactly like this. So, by the way, they have been being prosecuted. I don't want you to think that nothing has happened in the last 20 years. They've been prosecuted by the police, but on sentences which are not quite as strong as you'd think, and then being let out early. And Charlie Peters went to this court case, and he said he was the only member of the press in the gallery.
We know that feeling.
We've been completely ignored. And of course, the big thing that's happened is that Elon Musk picked up on it.
Yes.
So he knows those big podcasters. He's familiar with, and he just picked up on it, and that, you know, inevitably blew it apart in terms of an international story. I think that would not necessarily have made it as big a story as then the reaction of the Labour government.
Unbelievable.
The reaction of the Labour government is then to say, nothing to see here. It's all been dealt with. Go away. and then saying that the only people who are making a fuss about this were hanging on the coattails of the far right. And I've forgotten one important factor. The Reform Party, which is the populist party in the UK, has 5 MPs, which is the first time that anything like that has ever happened in British politics, that we're the first past the post system, a kind of right-leaning populist party has broken through Reform, whether you call them, and having those members of parliament meant that there was also an amplifying voice at the heart of Westminster, which meant that, again, suddenly they're not the outsiders, they're their MPs elected by people. And they kept standing up and saying, what about these grooming gangs? What about these rape gangs? So one way or another, it just feels to me, for the first time, that they can't get it to go away.
Yeah. However, they did, so I'm correct in saying that they just very recently had a vote in the House of Commons where people called for an investigation, an inquiry into what happened. And we're going to play a clip from you in a moment here. And that vote was defeated. That the people wanting to have this inquiry were defeated, and all of Labour apparently voted against that. Is that correct?
It is, although there was an attempt at hijacking a bill with an amendment by the Conservatives, which I would argue was tactically not positive, because it would have also destroyed that piece of legislation. And so the Labour Party had a good excuse to say, we demanded that you didn't vote for it. But where you're absolutely right was not just that vote. They could have said, don't use that mechanism for the inquiry, but don't worry, we're going to set up an inquiry.
Yes.
But they didn't. They absolutely doubled down in the vociferous way that they implied that anyone who was raising this was a troublemaker, far right, and obviously the inference was that we were playing the racist card.
Yeah.
Let's just pause for a moment here and just watch a recent exchange from you in the House of Lords discussing this. Let's watch that now.
My Lords, can the Minister explain why the government is presenting this as an either-or issue? I don't get it. Yes, implement Professor Jay's proposals. Great action. But the reason why victims are demanding a specific inquiry looking at the Pakistani heritage grooming gangs is, what does the government think about the fact that state agencies knew about the industrial rape of girls who were considered to be white trash, social workers, teachers, also police officers looked the other way? That's what we need an inquiry into. It's a specific problem. And to just say child sex abuse, and by the way, those who say political football, when I raised the Telford report in this House, people tut-tutted and shouted shameful, and they meant me, not the rapists. So it's been made a political football by others. There's a specific issue here. Can the government address it and do the J inquiry responses?
I say to the noble lady that the government is cognizant of the fact that there have been failures by individuals who should have had a responsibility for safeguarding children. And we are going to look at that, and we're going to put in place lessons, but I don't think, personally speaking, on behalf of the government also, that a 4 to 5 year inquiry, for the very reasons that the noble Viscount has just outlined, is going to add to the sum of knowledge that we have. What we need to do is to implement action to ensure that we prevent further child abuse, and that's what this government's main focus will be.
My Lord. Yeah, as you say, as you said, Claire,
people
they tut-tutted you, when you brought this up, and they were tut-tutting you, not the rapists,
yes. So as you know, Claire, I was in London last week. We have got the judge's sentencing remarks on a case, and you're right, by the way. Funny. The camera crew who were there weren't didn't know that much about it. But what shocked them was this was a case in Oxford.
Oh yeah,
right.
Oxford, yeah.
That it wasn't one of these post-industrial northern towns. It's all over the UK. Like Oxford, dreaming spires, academics, boat races, tea in the afternoon, and Muslim raping gangs. In 21st century Britain. So We went there, and on your recommendation, we used Dominic Frisby, the actor, to
reenact,
to play the judge, and we'll put up some photographs there of the recording after. It's amazing, and I mean it actually creates some problems for us. The judge's remarks. There's something like 16 pages, but some of it is so vile, so depraved.
Well, it's kind of what Claire was saying there.
I don't know how
it's at a pornographic level.
It's gonna but I don't think the vilest pornographer
would have thought of this.
Yeah. I mean, that's I don't know if, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for people to listen to it and see it. But it's all true. I suppose the fact that it's true and it's a judge saying it will help it.
But I think but we also think it's incredibly important that, we did record it and that we are going to release it online, because people need to hear it.
People need to hear it because they don't believe it. And I think that it's beginning to cut through. But there are still people who are slightly in denial.
Yes.
But I think now what's happened, just as a sort of mood shift, is the government actually brought out a statement. And that was the one where I kind of slightly lost my temper in the House of Lords. But in that statement, for the first time ever, they said predominantly Pakistani grooming gangs. That's the first time I'd ever seen it written down by a government. Any government. I mean, that includes the former government, which was the Conservative government. There were people in the Conservative Party at the end of their reign, but very much at the end of their reign, who started to say we should do something about this. Actually, to be Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak actually made something of a fuss about it when he was standing for a leadership position, and Kemi Badenoch as well. So I don't want to say, but they've been in power for 14 years. Mentioning the last year is not really going to count much. Yeah. But anyway, it's changed slightly. But just for your information and for those watching or listening, only today there started to be something of a break, because senior Labour people are beginning to say there should be an inquiry. And I think it's important I don't like inquiries.
Yeah.
I don't really want an inquiry.
Yeah.
I never call for an inquiry about anything. I think I certainly don't want things to be kicked into the long grass with lots of lawyers involved for years and years. But what I objected to was what they've tried to do up until now is to say that this is part of a child sex problem, right? Like paedophilia.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like, but it's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like this isn't kind of to do with sexual perversion in the paedophilia world way. So I feel odd talking about it. This is much more to do with the cultural attitudes of a group of Muslim men in their communities, by the way, which their communities often do not report.
Yes.
Even though they might find it disgusting, but they don't report them. Who think that all white women, well, they think that all women are pretty trash, right?
Yeah.
But at least theirs are kind of pure and covered up and virginal, whereas any white woman is open game, just like a piece of meat, right? And so it's not so much that they're kind of attracted to children per se.
Yeah.
It's even worse. It's kind of like they don't see them as humans, right? They're just there as orifices. I mean, I know, but that's what it's like. That's what it's like.
No. If you read,
she has read it. I mean,
if you read the transcript, that is exactly.
No, that's exactly what
that's
it's
exactly
like.
what
That's why I'm saying. So but anyway, there's been the government, and in fact, the more moderate and the media. Oh, don't talk to me. But the media have been terrible. But their big thing is, well, there is a report because there was a big inquiry into child sexual abuse. And actually, the grooming gangs barely feature. They only went to one town. They only talked to one victim. So it's part and parcel of the kind of horrors of paedophile. I mean, we know that there are paedophile rings, and we know that there are some in-family abuse of children. And it was kind of thrown in with that, and therefore wasn't distinct in any way.
No, and it is very distinct.
Yeah. The reason why I'm calling for an inquiry now, or it's not even an inquiry, is to say treat this as a separate, specific entity. And now senior Labour people are beginning to say the same, to the absolute mortification of the government. And partly it's self-preservation, but I also, because they're from the area of northwest England, where, to be honest, they would never get elected again unless they did. But let's give them credit and say they also, because they're from those areas, although Phelim's right to say Oxford, there's like 50 towns implicated, but predominantly it's a particular type of area.
Yeah.
They're from that area, and they know, right? And so they're just saying, no, we do need something specific on this. And so it's going to be very difficult for the government to get out of this now. I don't know how it's going to.
Yeah. I mean,
but Claire, so you're not really in favor of having an inquiry, but you kind of are. But like, what would you like to see happen next?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you can have an investigation. I mean, it's just that formal government inquiries in the UK are a nightmare.
They take 5 years.
There's a sort of independence. What they need is to have the power to be able to call upon senior people, you know what I mean, to get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
But there's even lots of things that you could do now. There's actually lots of information around that's not been put into the public domain, as it were. I mean, we've just talked about the transcripts, but in terms of numbers, you should go to every town, talk to every single social worker. I think you could have it all done in 9 months myself, but less than. I mean, I can imagine how you do it, because social services and the police and all these they know. Go to every children's home in all of these towns and talk to them. Have a town hall meeting with all the kids, right? And, you don't have to believe everything they say per se. I'm not dispensing with criminal justice. I just mean get the sort of sense, take their testimonies and then test them out. Go and work it out, right?
But also,
et cetera, et cetera.
Also, not reporting child sexual abuse, not as a police officer, not prosecuting, not following up. Those are criminal acts. That's malfeasance in public office. That is, you've a statutory duty to. I mean, there's a way you could investigate it. You could investigate it as criminal matters.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that's the other thing is that there is undoubtedly people who should be held to account in the sense that they have completely betrayed their professions. I mean, never mind betraying the girls, but betrayed the jobs. I mean, if you're head of social services, or you're the safeguarding officer for a local council and you look the other way on this, I mean, kick them out, right? So I do think that heads should roll. Just one thing, and this is a genuine dilemma I've got. The government, based on the previous inquiry, are calling for mandatory, that you have to report sex abuse. That it will be a criminal offence not to report it. And I just want to say that I'm opposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what will happen is that people will become risk averse and report any old thing that happens, right?
Yes.
So in the usual fashion that the state gets involved, they make a mess of something. It really irritates me. They've come up with a solution that actually will not help.
Yes.
There are people whose jobs it is to look after young people in our society, particularly those people whose parents are not looking after them. And this is the group of young women that we're particularly talking about. Mm-hmm. That I'm not even blaming the parents. We just all know in every society there is a group of people whose lives are too chaotic, and the young people associated with that, we owe a duty of care to. And they all went to school. They were all in homes. They all, practically all of them had social workers. They were all known by state agencies.
Yes. I mean, just to put it in context for American listeners and viewers, these are the deplorables. These are the garbage. These are the white trash. These are the people that the elites despise. And we all know who we are. And I wonder, so you've got somewhere like Michigan here that has predominantly Muslim cities.
Is it possible that it's happening here?
Yeah.
Well, we obviously that's one of the reasons why these investigations are important, so that we can find out those things. I do think that the UK's multiculturalism is particularly difficult. I think that what we have discovered, and this is something that everyone needs to look out for, is the point that I would make, which is that there was a great deal of fear and intimidation within the Muslim communities. I mean, you're going to not speak out because your whole, if you're the taxi driver that says, I'm going to talk out about this, you're not going to be running a taxi business for very long, right? That's no excuse. I'm just saying. Yeah. And the thing then is you'll then find out that the gang leader is, second cousin removed from the deputy mayor of the council, right?
Yeah.
Who's then related to, in some other fashion, to the police officer. And then everybody knows everyone, because the problem politically has been that in an area, think about how democracy works. And this is particularly pertinent, I think, in the US, and particularly with what happened in the last election. Democracy is where a politician appeals to every single individual voter to win their hearts and minds. That's what you do, right?
Yes.
But if you have identity politics that's so deeply rooted in policy that now what happens is you don't try and appeal to every single person who lives in Oldham or Bradford or what have you. You appeal to the communities in your community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you relate to community leaders, right? You don't relate to individuals, and you basically get effectively like a block vote. Right? So what you've had is, I'm afraid, a shameful silence within those communities, fear, intimidation, but sometimes misplaced loyalty. And sometimes just because politics hasn't bothered to ask. Because if you're saying, oh no, we've talked to the community leaders from the Muslim community and they say this, that means you're only talking to people who are unelected, who say that they represent a particular group, but you're not really talking to anyone individually about what's going on. So whether it's happening in your community, it depends. That's very entrenched in the UK, and I just don't know how. I'm not familiar enough.
Well, I mean, I remember in 2016, all the union leaders supported Hillary, and all the union members voted for Trump. I mean, she had the unions.
There's that, but it was also, it just reminded me. It's just like the way you remember. Well, I mean, I can't, but like somebody tells them, an off joke at one of the Trump rallies, and it's just assumed that everybody from that community will therefore not vote Trump, right? It's like everybody's like a blob. As far as they're concerned, everyone's just a blob, an identity blob.
Yeah.
There's no understanding that possibly within that there are masses and masses of individuals with different views. I mean, So I'm simply making that point. The way that they kind of try to appeal to Black American men to do the right thing. And then
it's so insulting.
American women were all saintly and hallowed.
They all think the same. They all think exactly the same in lockstep.
Exactly.
And the women, as you say, the women are saintly, and the men are just, they need
whatever.
Only one correction that I wanted to make was when you were saying about white trash and deplorables, Phelim. I mean, it's not that I disagree with you, but as you know, that the white trash and deplorables label has actually been given over to the whole of the working class. And, from the wrong kind of parts of town. Yeah. But in this instance, these really are young people from the most, what used to be known in the old days as a kind of an underclass of people, no fault of their own.
Yes.
So they're not the kind of respectable working class. I mean, they really are already disadvantaged in very many instances.
Hugely. I used to teach them.
The second thing is that this was a racial crime, because the perpetrators made it clear to the girls as they were abusing them that they considered them to be impure white filth, right? Slags, right? Like they said white a lot, all of the testimonies and the victims. So their ethnicity was drawn attention to. It wasn't just an act of, sexual violence. It was taking out on them the utter contempt that those Muslim men viewed white society. Now, the difficulty we've got is this is the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Predominantly, through no fault of anyone's, the majority of people are white. This is not anything to boast about or be embarrassed about. It's just true. If then within the United Kingdom, there are groups of people whose seething hatred of white people exhibits itself in this most loathsome behavior. And running parallel to that, you have the growth of a politicized Islamism that thinks that everything that the West represents is degenerate and should be destroyed, and nihilistically, physically destroyed, bombed, and so on. Not a good combination.
No. No. It doesn't bode well for the UK's future. It you know, I don't know how that gets resolved, because that population they're not going anywhere, and they're growing. So
and they're often, by the way, final thing. People say, oh, well, we can resolve this through stopping immigration. It's not that straightforward, because actually many of these people are I mean, that's a different question. It gets muddled up. But many of these are second, third generation immigrants, and they're actually, ironically, their parents or their grandparents, you know, kind of wore jeans and were fully integrated and were members of, you know, like it's not simple to think that this is kind of people bringing backward attitudes from peasant society. I mean, we forced people, those communities, almost to revert back to seeing themselves as Pakistani through multiculturalism, in preference to being modern
British
members of Western society in the United Kingdom and British citizens. It's us that have emphasized their roots all the time. And so it's tragic, because you're absolutely right. I don't, and by the way, many millions, not millions, but, you know, many thousands of Pakistanis who live here are British citizens, you know, mates and so on and so forth. But it is also shameful, I think, that there hasn't been more condemnation and vociferous leadership by people from different parts of the Muslim community that haven't spoken out. I mean, that's also an honest truth.
That silence has been kind of deafening. All right, from leaders within the community who should be condemning this outright. Claire, we have come to the end of this extraordinary conversation. I mean, this is amazing stuff. It's you know, we're all trying to. It's just really hard to get your head around it, but it's incredibly important that people hear about it, and so that's why we've decided to do this and to put this out. And we have
the verbatim, the judge's sentencing remarks,
which should be listened to in full.
It should be listened to in full. We're going to put it out as a podcast. We're going to put it out as on YouTube. The whole on Twitter. It's one of the most important projects we've ever worked on. It's wild, but verbatim is so powerful. Courtroom verbatim testimony is so powerful. We're not letting this drop, and we're going to keep it going. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Oh, Claire, how can people get you? How can people find you?
I'm Fox_Claire on X, and there's the Academy of Ideas YouTube channel. And we also have a Substack, which is Claire Fox or Academy of Ideas. I can't remember, but one way or another, you'll find me. And honestly, do let's all keep in touch. I mean, this is, I don't just mean Anne and Phelim, but I mean your followers too. I think that I need to understand what's happening in the US and have tried to, and you need to understand what's happening in the UK, because the West is on the line here. I mean, this is the West, right? And sometimes we kind of get a bit insular, and we need to understand the world by talking to each other. This has to be a solidarity project, transatlantic.
Well, we're in favor of that.
Elon Musk is leading that, actually.
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
All right.
Claire, thank you very much.
And we'll put all those links, actually, Claire, up in our show notes. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So, you know, again, as I mentioned earlier, we would really ask you to help us to get this story out to the widest possible audience. And any donation, we have a very generous donor who will double everything that you send. And we need it. We need it very badly, because this is an incredibly important story, and all the stories that we cover are very important. So please give what you can. It's early to the unreportedstoriesociety.com. You can see the link is coming up there on the screen. So it's unreportedstoriesociety.com. And just click on that and you'll get to the donate page.
I mean, this is going to be a massive project, hopefully, too, because Elon Musk is interested in it. And the actor actually tweeted out that he was doing this, and Elon Musk retweeted it. So we want this to be seen by tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people.
Yes.
And the way to do that is to advertise it, to make it something that you can't ignore. It's in your inbox by advertising. So
please help us do that.
Please help it. People are very often very happy to help you produce something. They don't understand it.
Well, we also need help with the producing of it. So
Yes.
obviously, all those costs have to be covered. So we do appeal to you to help in every way that you possibly can. And again, all your donations will be doubled. So please donate often and early, and please today.
Yes.
Now.
Thank you.
Why not?
Unreportedstorysociety.com.
Thank
We
you.
will see you next week. Hopefully our house will still be standing. Hopefully it'll rain tonight.
Yes. I think that's not likely, but
it's not likely.
Who knows?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for all your well wishes and all your inquiries, and let us know what you think of the program in the comments in the YouTube section and on the Apple Podcast app. We always read your comments and we always listen to them. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey!